Hi. Well, this is really a treat for me to come and share my stories from many years ago. I mean, I could have never imagined all those years ago I was witnessing something that would be interesting all these years later, but it's just as relevant now, even more so. I was just doing some freelance work in Paris in the fall, winter of 1978, and I ended up doing a few stories for UPI, and they asked me to go cover this guy, Ayatollah Khomeini. I'd never heard of him. He was having some sort of a revolutionary event taking place in a town 25 miles west of Paris, and I spent 3 days there, and one night. I mean, not all night, but into the night, because my ride were the freelance photographers, and they had to hang around in case someone famous showed up. But I have a story to tell about what I actually witnessed there, which was revolutionary and historic, but really what I now understand it to be, thanks to what I've learned from juxtaposition and you, Josh, about all the mendacities. And it's quite, I think, relevant to today's time when Iran is so much in the news.
Indeed, that's actually really interesting because here we are in 2026, and so much of that is just almost happening again, and it's eerie almost. But
Mhm.
that's one motivation for why we wanted to do this topic, but also because it is connected to what we talked about last week: NGOs, foundations, institutes, think tanks. It's just this big hydra or octopus with all these tentacles that's all over, and almost anywhere you go, anywhere you look, it pops.
Well, so was Vietnam. They used Vietnam as a laboratory experiment for Dow Chemical, who developed napalm. Napalm. You want any napalm in your Hamlet? And then Monsanto. We know Monsanto through Agent Orange, but there's Agent Pink, there's Agent Azul,
Mhm.
there's Periwinkle Blue, Orange. Monsanto. There's Roundup. There's pesticides, herbicides, defoliant. That they're in the defoliant business. Defoliant with carcinogens that can cause cancer. And Monsanto wasn't the only corporation. U.S. Rubber. There's all these other companies who make napalm and Agent Pink, Orange, Green, Blue. In other words, it's not just Monsanto. They have doppelganger evil twins that make these weapon systems to defoliate so that the satellites can see down, the spy satellites and the spy planes can see if enemy troops are moving at night. I said night because that's when the guerrillas would move, at night, because during the day everyone can see what's going on, but at night you had the cover of night. But not if you defoliate the jungle, and not if you have Monsanto and Lockheed and Raytheon Missile Guidance. Then 24/7, the military NATO forces can illuminate your hamlets day and night. Okay, so that's going back to the 1950s and 60s, in 70s in Vietnam. But the
Even old biblical at times. I was there one night because my ride with the photographers wasn't going to leave until night, and Khomeini came out at night, and it was pitch black. There weren't street lights or anything around. It was a small little village, and just as soon as he enters his tent for prayers, there was this huge thunder and pouring rain. I mean, that's why it felt like a Hollywood production. And I was standing under a little, you know, something to keep out of the rain, overhang, and just listening to these chants coming from inside this tent, which was all aglow. And I just felt like
Otherworldly.
exactly. Like I was either in a time machine and I'd gone back to some time in the Old Testament, or this was a Hollywood production. It was one or the other.
The That term is I won't say like it's an absolute, but it's very similar to how trance works. Like the Hollywood stare here and you'll be hypnotized. That's one thing, but trance is that like I'm in this experience. I'm transference. You're transferred into the experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah.
very interesting.
And so, but when it was time for Khomeini to leave, all of a sudden everything, the rain just stopped, the thunder stopped, everything, and he just went back to his house. And but as I stood there under the little lean-to to not get wet, some young Iranian came up to me and he was all excited and happy and kind of just all aglow. And he said, "Well, what do the Americans think about this?" And I thought, well, what am I going to say? And I said something really stupid. I said, well, I guess Americans are afraid that the communists, the communists will take over if the Shah goes. And the guy just, he just said, Americans have no idea what's going on. Inauguration, I covered the inauguration of Ronald Reagan, which would have been January
Today.
20th, 1981.
That's why I said keep that date in your mind at the beginning to the audience.
It's the
Yeah, and so I
44th
was
year
there.
anniversary of Ronald Reagan's inauguration and the release of the hostages from the State Department.
Yes, and he veered from script during his inauguration. He said, I just want everyone to know, I've just gotten word that our hostages have cleared Iranian airspace and they're en route to Germany and they're all going to be safe and sound. And everybody cheered and it was, oh, happy day. Ronald Reagan is here. And Jimmy Carter was sitting there looking really defeated.
There's I think it might have been his second term, but his second term when he was inaugurated facing the obelisk, which was significant.
You're talking about Reagan.
I think it was his second swearing.
No, well, the second one, I believe he had to do indoors because
okay, then it was this one. This would have been the first one.
Well, that's typically where
side of the there's a lot of different slogans like money makes the world go around, right? And without water, there can be no farming. Mm-hmm. Without water, there can be no sewage treatment. Without water, there can be no canals and, barges and deliveries like they do in Europe. They have a barge system along the rivers and canals in the different countries in Western Europe. And so if that's sort of a graphic visual model, if you visited farmlands or you visited Western Europe, you will see bridges and canals and rivers and barges and coal and farm products being moved from here to there. This is the concept of the port facility, which has embankments to control the flow of the canal or river. They can adjust that. They can adjust the speed, the current, right? And they can create the ebb or slack tide of estuaries. That's all done. And so if you think of banking in the way that you think of farming and water systems and port facilities, you'll understand banking, because banking is the imagery of water management. Just like water is essential, so too is the token credit, the social credit that we universally accept as a means of exchange, where you have exchange starts out with merchants exchange. A farmer sells to his broker, the food broker then sells to the grocery stores or the food markets, and you have a chain of command of from farm to table. But it doesn't really happen by accident. Gladio, which is a pyramid within a pyramid. It's an assassination and terrorism group, part of NATO. That's part of NATO. You see, NATO is above it. They call it OTAN and NATO. It's NATO OTAN. They spell it forward and backward. But Operation Gladio is the assassination, torture, kidnapping, and the army left behind in every Hunger Game nation of the world. Operation Gladio has offices, and they partner with your local county sheriff in the fusion department, and they can go out and murder people physically. That's if you don't want to do it on a keyboard using a 24-year-old graduate of MIT who could target you because you have a MAC address and a real ID, and they can put you down without having to send the Gladio team in. But this is all being done out of Geneva, Switzerland, which is home to the United Nations. The United Nations is headquartered in Geneva. Now, I realize it's headquartered in Manhattan, New York also, but that's the doppelganger twin, New York City and Geneva. And guess what? Paris and London and Hong Kong and Tehran and Cairo and Tel Aviv and Rome, Italy, and Milan, Italy, and Rio de Janeiro, and Buenos Aires, and Santiago, Chile, they all have Gladio offices, they all have NATO offices, and they all have agencies of the United Nations, which if you go down the list of all the different agencies, you'll see that our entire world economics, our entire world anthropology has been planned. We have a planned society and a planned banking and a planned military. And I hope this is going to help, viewers who are wondering how you can, have a coup d'etat, install the Shah of Iran for 26 years, conduct a second from Canada into New York illegally. But then you can be a Don, and you can do prostitution, and you can do drug trafficking, and so on and so forth. And protection, where you sell insurance without a license, it's called protection racket. To prevent people from throwing a brick through your window, you pay me $100 a week, and I'll make damn sure nobody throws a brick through your window. But if you don't give me the $100, I'll throw the brick through the window.
Right.
Okay? That's how I guarantee your subjugation, because your business is in my franchise. That's the Godfather. And the Godfather didn't go bossing people around, like Klaus Schwab does, or like Bill Gates says, we all got to get vaccinated, right? See, the Godfather would never be that discourteous. What he says instead is he sends one of his minions out and says, the Godfather would like to ask a favor of you. I'd like to ask a favor. God help you if you decline the favor, right?
Well,
favor makes it sound like it's voluntary, but if you refuse a favor, what is the Godfather's policy? Once refused a favor, the Godfather will never ask a second favor, ever. Which means you are now cast adrift, and you don't have any protection within his franchise. You are not aligned with the captain of your ship. You are a disrespectful. You've shown disrespect. Disrespect means non-compliant. These are the synonyms that the military uses. Non-compliant people are resistors. Today, Donald Trump would call them domestic terrorists.
I'm pretty sure they have. Yeah.
We have ICE, and this is why we have the Department of Homeland Security, and we have these intelligence operations like the Fusion Center, and we are collecting your emails and your text messages, is because we're trying to do proactive policing, which means the thought police. That if you say anything negative about Jewish people or Israel, we will send, a NATO soldier to your home to intimidate you, because we use intimidation, not free choice. Intimidation. That's how the Godfather works. But he doesn't do it overtly. He does it politely by asking you for a favor. And this is what they're doing with the Real ID. They're asking you to go get your Real ID because it's for your protection.
Yeah.
So people won't hack into your bank account, and we know who you are. But they're inviting you into a process where you're going to be harvested like a dairy cow, then spit out to the cremation oven. Don't you get it? When they're polite like the God.
They do a lot of these things in these third world countries. They test out a lot of stuff, and then they bring it. It's like off Broadway, and then they bring it back for the big show.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, that was